Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Friends, welcome to the very last season. Very last episode of this first season of Under the Hat. I'm super stoked to be with here this evening, this afternoon. We are Thursday, May the 9th. And so you might be watching this in the future. You might be watching or joining us now. I'm starting to see people pop up in the Instagram. So really appreciate all of you who have contributed, who have shared that love with everything that's under the hat. And so we're at episode 24 here, and know that I will take the summer off. I will be doing some reels, some highlights of all the amazing guests that we've had on the show. But we're wrapping this season up in a very special way. So for the first time on the show, we have not one guest, but we have two. And so I am super excited to have these amazing humans with me. So they are podcasters themselves, and I was on their show a while back. Complete blast, really cool premise. We're going to dive into that for sure. But I am joined by JoDee Scissors and Ailey Simon, both rock stars in terms of not just the educational space, but also like a very unique kind of conversation of like what it's like to shift out of the classroom. What does it mean to have your lifestyle change, have your sometimes personality change, your family change as a result? But again, I'm just super excited to have you both. And so, JoDee, why don't we start with you? How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. It's been a busy week, but I'm glad I can just settle down and have a good chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love the hat. I really appreciate that. That's a good flex. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite hats. It's from California, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
Seen a lot of places out there. Yeah, and this is just a little memory from Joshua Tree.
Yeah. Awesome. That is beautiful. Allie, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Representing some Navy love here. My husband just had a really big milestone in his career last Friday, a change of command ceremony. So I thought this was appropriate to don for today's episode.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So again, thanks again. We like to start things with, people that are listening, whether it's right now or in the future. Where are you all professionally, and maybe perhaps like for the context of this show, like where did you come from, right? Like I understand that you both were teachers. I understand that you came from education, so perhaps a little bit of context about that and what led you to this moment of being a podcaster and wherever you are professionally. Allie, why don't we start with you if you don't mind?
Great. So, I was a teacher for my first career. I was a high school Spanish teacher for 7 years. And as I mentioned, my husband's in the Navy, so I'm a military spouse. And after many moves, being certified in 4 different states, teaching in 4 different states, having a child that had a health scare that really kind of shook us a little bit, I decided to make a transition into leave teaching. And it was pretty abrupt for me. And then I re-entered working into the nonprofit world, and then eventually landed where I am today, which I work with different grant programs providing training and technical assistance. So I've worked on apprenticeship grants. I'm working on a career connected high school grant now. And kind of along that journey, JoDee and I met, and we talked about how we both used to be teachers, which was an immediate, connection. And teacher shift was born. Actually, we thought it was going to be teacher brain to begin with, so that's not inaccurate. And then previously it was the great teacher resignation. But I don't want to take everything away from JoDee, because I know she'll maybe say a little bit about the podcast too. But that's how we ended up here and connecting with you today, Steve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm not going to ask this now because I do want to hear from JoDee, but at some point I want to hear how you two met, whether like that was in education or like within industry. So we'll get there. JoDee, what about you? What's your origin story? What'd you teach? What'd you do? What do you do now?
Yeah, so I was a language immersion teacher for most of my career. I was a teacher for 13 years and taught in several different states: Texas, Kentucky, Illinois, Maryland. Moved around a lot due to the nature of my husband's job. And then after 13 years, I decided that I just needed a change from the classroom, but I knew I wanted to stay in an education space. And so I found a very niche area of education that I really feel like I flourish in and that I connect well with and that really motivates me and keeps me inspired. And so I mostly work in arts education, arts integration, and I have my own company. It's called Paper Planes Ed, and I collaborate with arts institutions and nonprofits to bring more arts education, whether that's media, resources, professional development, whatever it may be. That's kind of my area of expertise now. And on the side, I am a writer. I write children's books, and I am also a podcaster with Allie because we just found really common ground and we're really passionate about this kind of taboo topic that is not really discussed in school buildings, but maybe at a happy hour or outside of school, that we really wanted to support teachers that perhaps went through some hardships or are going through hardships in the way that we did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's certainly, I never thought about it that way. Like, I know that teachers think it, but they don't say it. Like, it's almost like a guilt. And I believe we talked about that, or I talked about that on your show. So very, very curious, so how you two met, like how you two connected, and a little bit of that context. It sounds like Allie wants to jump in. So Allie, please enlighten
I
me.
was just getting ready. So
That's good. That's good.
I feel like I always end up starting this one, but not a problem. So JoDee and I, both of our kids were in Spanish immersion together. So we were parents at the same school, and during COVID, started a play group for our kids after school. Well, after like Zoom school, and we're chatting one day on a park bench while our kids were playing. And lo and behold, I talked about this idea with her. We really connected about both being former teachers. And I think honestly that allowed us to, in that moment, know that our kids needed like socialization and needed these other things that they weren't getting from remote learning. And we just pitched this idea together about starting a podcast to talk about teachers who had transitioned from the classroom into something else, whether that was maybe in a different role in their school district, whether that was into ed tech, whether that was into arts education, whether that was into project management, whether that was into a lot of other fields, and really felt like these stories needed to be told, and feelings and emotions and all of that kind of eventually came out. But we just initially, I think it was really storytelling. JoDee, do you feel like that's kind of how we started off?
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that everybody has a unique family circumstance, work circumstance, and we wanted to be able to share the story so we can have deeper connections with some of the feelings that we're having, some of the problems, because we know that not everybody's story is exactly the same, but we can definitely feel some of strong connections, whether it's in the workplace or something that we're going through emotionally or mentally, whatever it might be. So yeah, we're out here to share stories. We are trying to provide a platform to educators who maybe didn't have a chance to tell their story at the time of their shift, or can't tell their story right now, but can connect with someone who can, have a similar story to them.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Like, because that's a good point, that everyone's story of why they shift is vastly different. Like, it's really rare that, like, oh, I shifted just like Steve. Like, that's not a thing, right? And so to me, like, giving that voice, amplifying that voice for people that, yeah, maybe they weren't able to share, right? Like during that time, maybe there's like I don't know, like again, going back to the guilt or maybe the shame of like their community, be like, how dare you not educate our children, right? But I found though that like depending on where you shift, you can still be doing similar work, right? And having an impact, because at the end of the day, most teachers are there to improve someone else's situation or life or position, right? And so I don't know if you two feel that way, like in terms of like the work you're doing now, like how is what you're doing now similar or different to education before? Allie, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. So I think, what you mentioned, that teachers go into it because they want to have an impact, they want to make a difference. I think you're spot on. I think it's very rare that I've met a teacher that's like, I went into it for the money, right? I mean, it's just not the thing. So, but I think with me, like leaving the classroom, that was something that I really struggled with because I missed that very personal interaction. And I guess in a way, like it was guilt that I was feeling. Kind of feels selfish in a way because it's like I wanted to feel good about what I was doing, that I was like making a difference. Now I know that the work that I do, I provide support to grantees who are serving youth, right? So they're the direct ones that are working with youth day to day. But the work that I do helps provide them with resources, with trainings, with coaches who help guide them along their process. And so I know I'm indirectly impacting, youth and people's lives, but it's very different. And I think for a while I tried to fill that void. Like I missed that. I mean, I talked to JoDee about this a lot. I'm like, maybe I'll go back to teaching one day because I do miss that a lot. And I started volunteering more to try to get that same level of like feeling like I was helping at my community. But honestly, I got super burnt out because I was working full time and I'm a mom and I'm a spouse and I have, and so I was like, okay, I can only do so much. And I've had to learn to kind of let go a little bit of maybe that guilt that I had for still many years, and know that like this is where I am right now. And I know, knowing that I still have these feelings, I will be back there giving that, that one-on-one, that direct connection one day. But right now I'm content, trying to be content with where I am professionally and personally. And I think that innate kind of feeling or quality that you have while you want to be a teacher, it's probably always there. It just shapes a little bit differently once you're not in the classroom.
Yeah. I definitely want to jump over to JoDee on that. But one quick thing, Allie, like what really resonated with me with what you said is like if you shift out, it's important to still do things that fill that void. Because there is a teacher void that's there that probably isn't always getting fulfilled all the time. So example, like I go to my old school, and I've just volunteered. Like I'm one of their mentors for one of their academies, right? Like, and it's a cool one time a month thing. And then some of my students are still there, like because I haven't been gone that long, right? So for me, that fills that void. I think that's important for anybody that leaves, whether it's to go back to college or like higher ed or like whatever the case is, to still have that fulfillment, because I think that's important. But JoDee, like what is your take on all this?
Yeah, so, I think that anybody that can make an impact in education, whether you're a teacher or a parent or a community member or volunteer, like your role is important. Like everybody's a stakeholder in public education. Like if you can lend a hand, that's great. And so because I'm outside of the classroom, I have very specific ways that I measure my impact on students. Different from what, when you're in the classroom, you're like in front of kids, you have your roster, how you're impacting. But now it just looks a little bit different. I have, if I do a PD with X amount of teachers, I'm impacting X amount of students. If we create media and we have, hundreds of thousands of streams from learners, like I know that I'm making an impact, but the analytics are a little bit different and my role is a little bit different. But I know from the tracking of the grants that we have, the deliverables we have to make, that we have certain numbers and goals that we're trying to meet. And I know at the end of the day, when we finish a project, we have reached students, and that's the ultimate goal. I'm not in front of them, which took a really long time to get used to, but I see the impact, and I'm happy with that. And the other hat that I wear is being a mom, and
Mm.
I have this incredible job that allows me to work directly with my daughter's school. And so, like right now, we're in the thick of a musical production. And so I'm able to lend a hand. I'm able to volunteer in the evenings. I'm able to help, the lead producers and what they're doing. I can go build some furniture for the stage. And so I'm making an impact directly with the person that was one of the reasons I left, was because I wasn't accessible to help or go on field trips with my daughter. I was not able to take her to her appointments. And so now I just have this amazing access to be able to fulfill one of the biggest jobs of my life, which is being a mom and being present. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever job I have that pays my salary, it will never be as important a job as it is to raising my daughter.
That's yeah, that's such a good point, because when I left, and I may have mentioned this on the teacher shift, is that when I left, I'm like, wait a second, I'm just a better dad. Like I'm a better husband. Um,
I
and
remember that line so well from whenever you were on our episode, like, and I remember you kind of feeling emotional about it, and it is emotional because it is such an honor to raise kids. It is such an important job, and to know that you're doing it well feels good, or you're doing it your best that you can.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things too where you kind of, I see still my teacher friends, like they're busing their kids to school, then they're getting to their school, and then will they make it in time after school to get their own children, right? The homework afterward, like it's like this non-stop, like from a hose, like going really, really, really aggressive at you. And it's like, it's just that, how, like there's something about the system, right? There's something about how all of this is constructed that makes it cruel, right? Like for anybody that really wants to teach but really wants to be a good parent, it's almost like you have to pick which one's more important, your kid or everyone else's.
And the irony for me is that I went into teaching because that partially, a large reason, because I knew that I wanted to be a parent one day. And I thought this would be a great career for being a parent, like because I would have summers off and I would have a school schedule. And so I think it was a really hard pill to swallow, like because I taught high school, like what you were saying, my school hours were different from elementary school hours. And like I couldn't even drop off my kids. Like I literally couldn't drop off my kids. That's part of why I left my last year, was because my son got into the Spanish immersion elementary school and I
Mm.
couldn't get him to school on time there before care didn't open up early enough and then make it to my school. So yeah, it's just the irony of it.
So I have to ask you both, and so we'll go with JoDee first, and because like we talked about how, like, oh, teachership so taboo. So I'm gonna do a taboo question to your taboo topic, right? And this is something that's probably you've heard before, and so this is me just like being the typical person that I am, and be like, let's challenge this a little bit. And so what I think of and what I know I've heard and possibly you've heard is like, okay, all that's fine, but the people that you're really pulling out are at least some of them, the talent, the ones that are strong with students, they have the skill set, like they have the skill in business, that has to mean that they had some skill in the classroom, right? And like, are we going to get to the point where like there's no one going to want to be in these classrooms, like, and is it going to be a moment of like really like a lot of first year, second year teachers at a given school, at a given district? Like, I'm just curious what your take is, and like how you view that pushback, JoDee.
Yeah. So that's a really great and very loaded question. And Allie and I have had some really good conversations about this as well. So we know that like there's still a great resignation going on. And we see really good talent, really good teachers leaving. And every year since I have left, some of the best teachers I have ever worked with are leaving. And that to me is heartbreaking, because you know that they are really making a huge impact in the classroom. And what we want in education is for there to be really high quality teachers making high impact. And so when they are leaving, you wonder what will be the impact, what will be the implications of that. So in my case, I can say that when I left, there were a couple of teachers on my team that were awesome. And part of like me accepting leaving, and I also was mentoring a teacher. Part of me leaving was knowing that this teacher that I mentored, these teachers that I work with were really good teachers, and it was kind of a passing of the torch. Like they're in good hands. Now they need to use their repertoire to help build up the next teacher. But to your point, when we have this constant flow of teachers resigning, even the good teachers, we're filling them with young teachers who are so energetic, who are so positive, who want to change the world, but their repertoire just isn't quite as strong as that experienced teacher that really can make a quick impact, can assess, and knows like a wealth of strategies. And then we're also seeing states like Florida that are filling jobs with unqualified people, that are filling the role of teacher with, very little experience. And I think,
Do you have a pulse? Well, you have a job.
Yeah. And so we're seeing that, and we will see the implications of it. And what is
Right.
to me like the most discouraging and devastating part of that is the data will be shown in student achievement. So yeah, it's really tough. It's a really tough topic, and it's very like, stomach churning topic.
Yeah.
Allie, you want to add to that?
No, yeah.
You go first, and then I'll go after you.
Well, yeah. Like, because like you just talked about like the student performance, like obviously data comes with that assessment, but like for me, the other part of that too is like the ability for high quality teachers to make students feel safe, feel welcome, like inclusion, like there's social emotional learning, right? Like with just it's like there's all these things that they fulfill such a need. They're the hubs of our community. And when we see that exodus, right, like we shall see what the outcome is really going to be, like to JoDee's point. But yeah, Allie, would love to hear your thoughts and your brain on this.
I have a lot of thoughts, like JoDee, and I think that people ask us this a lot when we tell them what the podcast is about. They're like, "Are you encouraging teachers to leave?" Well, no, that is not our goal. Our goal is just to provide an opportunity for teachers who are interested, who are already shifted, to share their story, so that you don't feel so alone. Like, it's okay to like think about leaving. Maybe you're not going to ever leave the classroom, but like it's natural. Like people think about leaving jobs all the time. Most people don't stay in their same job that they're in for their entire career. And I think that's really where my mind goes, is that our society is changing. There's new professional opportunities all the time. They say that our kids will go into careers potentially that don't even exist right now. So, we're just constantly changing. And so I wonder if this notion, this idea of being in a profession like education for 20 or 30 years, that's also changing. I mean, we see it a lot in the military, which is what, my spouse does. Most people don't make it to 20 years in the military. And that's also another kind of like giving back to your country, to your community type job. Yet we don't ever say to a veteran, like, man, you left after 5 years. Why did you do that? We're not like hard on them for leaving their job. We thank them for their service, like they should be thanked, because it's a big sacrifice. And, we encourage them to go into other careers. We highly regard them. That's how we should be treating teachers too. Like, however long you serve in the classroom, you are valuable to your community and you made an impact and you made a difference. What I would like us to reconsider is, instead of focusing on like how we're going to fill this pipeline of teachers who are leaving, and it's like a focus on how can we get people certified as quickly as possible, or where can we get this new talent? We need to be focusing on retention. That's what we need to be focusing on. And so, like you were talking about social emotional learning for our students, what about for teachers? Like, they never get to think about what's good for them. And the whole time, kind of, you were asking that question about, but they're leaving and they're great teachers, but how are they doing? Like, they might be great in the classroom, but like on the inside, they're not well. Maybe, we've heard from guests, we've heard other people's stories. And so then they're sacrificing their own well-being. And I don't think we want anybody to do that. So I think there needs to be a balance of looking into how we can retain talent, and re-examine the structure of our system, because we're just putting more and more on teachers, and it's not sustainable where it is today. And if you keep adding to their plate, if you keep cutting budgets, and if you keep increasing the class sizes, that's not going to help this retention issue. So I think until we're willing to kind of take a step back and look at the whole picture instead of just filling in, the gaps when they come, we're going to just struggle with this for a really long time. And like JoDee said, the people who are going to be impacted the most are our youth.
Yeah. I mean, some of the main questions that administrators need to ask themselves is, how can we retain our staff? How can we encourage young people to go into education in undergrad, because they're seeing low enrollment in education programs and colleges in general. But yeah, it's like, how are we going to improve the situation to be able to sustain and keep our teachers?
Yeah. No, like, Ali, I think you hit it on the head with the retention piece, right? Like, retention is key. And retention in a authentic way and realistic way. Not just being like, hey teachers, we're gonna have pizza for lunch today. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
We're going to give you $1,800 for
What's the one that's going around right now? It's like, we're going to give you Jeans Friday.
Oh, yeah.
That's not going to keep. That's not going to keep them around.
And I mean, I think about, I've been working a lot on like career planning for high schoolers recently, and like, sitting down with teachers and having those discussions, like, how are you doing? Where do you see yourself, in a few years? How can we keep you engaged in the classroom? Like, what would make it better for you? Do you want to, instead of always saying like, take on more responsibilities, like, is it sustainable for you to be sponsoring these 2 clubs and coaching a sport after school, now that we know you've had your second baby? Like, I mean, really, it's just,
yeah.
You have these conversations with people in an authentic way, like in a personalized way.
Yeah. And so something that I've talked to my friend Sophie with, who's not here. She's normally here. She's not here. She's been on the show before. So Sophie and I had a conversation once of like, okay, cool. Like, the teachers that are leaving the classroom, they're leaving the profession are typically the talented ones, right? It's like the good teachers that are leaving, but it's also the good teachers at a school site that are in the situation where like, oh, you have these responsibilities because you can handle it. And just because you can handle it doesn't mean that it's easy. And like
Yeah.
that should be no surprise why the talent is leaving then,
Yeah.
if that is what the treatment is.
And something that Allie and I talk about is even the young teachers, because they have energy and they have, they want to change the world, you still shouldn't be burning them out. Just because they're young, just because they may not have a family yet, and this could be anybody that's a single person, like just because they might not have a child to take care of at the end of the day, they still don't deserve to be given a huge workload because of that. They deserve time to themselves. They deserve time with their friends and their family or their pet, or a walk in the park. Like they equally deserve those things. They deserve a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of, like, for me at least, of when I did shift. I was like, wait, I can go to the bathroom when I want. Like I can go for a walk. I got me, okay, you can't see it, it's hidden. I got me one of those little like walking pads. I'm like, let's go. Like you can't really like take care of yourself like that. You're laughing, but like it's like legit, like, oh wait, I can actually work on myself instead of working on the 120 students that I would normally have, right? And that's a big deal.
Yes. And we talk about how teachers are often like those selfless personalities where we put everybody else first, right? So we're going to put our students first. We're going to put our own family first. And then our, health and well-being kind of goes to the bottom. And that takes a toll when you do that consistently and you're not prioritizing yourself. And so I love hearing that when you made that shift, that you were able to start taking care of yourself. And I recently started doing a lot more to take care of myself. And I feel so much better. I'm like, why did I wait this long to do it? But, it's just so important.
And I just wanted to add that on our podcast, we don't just talk about shifting out of the classroom. A shift can just be a lifestyle shift, because I know a lot of teachers that live very sustainable lives because they set their boundaries. They know when to say no. They know what their capacity is, and they're great teachers. But they've been around the block. They know what to say yes to and what not to say yes to. And then it could just be mindset. It might be that they just need some support in figuring out their financial situation. So it may be a lateral shift, like where you're going into a staff development role, or maybe AP or math specialist or whatever it may be. So there are many shifts a teacher can take that aren't just leaving the classroom altogether, that can really support their lifestyle. Or maybe it's just that little shift that they need to get to decide what they need for the next shift. And so like Allie, she shifted out of the classroom and she just made a shift to another job. And so life is full of these little shifts. And if we can hear stories and be equipped with the right resources to make them a little bit more graceful and a little less painful, I think that can go a long way.
So wait, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly in terms of what you've done with the show. Are you saying that you've had people on the show that it's not even an education context? It's just like maybe from one industry to another, that nothing to do with education?
Yeah, so we've had financial experts on to talk about, what happens if you leave, what do you need to do to improve your financial situation if you do stay a teacher. We have experts in other areas that hire teachers. We have counselors. We have all kinds of people. Allie, do you want to add to that list? We have all kinds of people.
We had a recent guest who we thought would be a really good person to have on, who made a shift out of one profession and into another. She was an attorney, which is very specialized, kind of like being a teacher, right? And then she went into health and wellness. And so I thought that was very interesting, because you don't really see people making that transition. And just to hear her story about how it took a lot of courage, to leave something that you worked so hard to do, like going to law school. And I think a lot of teachers can relate to that, because a lot of educators have their master's degree, they spend a lot of time and money studying. And I think that goes along with leaving something that you've worked so hard to do and to become an expert at into something maybe unknown, or, it could be connected. Like JoDee is very connected to education in her role now. And so are you, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We do spend a lot of money and time on all of our degrees, like to actually train to be a teacher. And because I have my master's, right? Like that thing, it wasn't cheap, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
a lot. And so for me, I feel lucky that I still feel like I'm using those degrees at Cami. Like I still on the professional development side, right? Like I'm obviously using that, but I can see how that could be scary if you're like, oh, I'm shifting to something entirely different, right? Like maybe I don't know, like if I just went into, I don't know, selling software in the medical field. I'm just up top of my head, out of my hat.
Hey,
Like
sales is a teacher skill. Oh my gosh, that was
it
almost
is.
my Texas accent coming out right there. Skill. Yeah. So I was just gonna say, like, we have like all of these little skills. We can wear lots of hats. And we have the ability to do a lot. We don't have, like, we think of ourselves as like just like very like narrow niche. But if you really dig deep into all the things that a teacher is capable of, you can virtually go into any field you put your mind to because you are so skilled.
That is true. That I like, and with what I do now, while it's education, like educational technology, they're working for a business. You grow into it. We're like, I didn't realize that I had that kind of brain. It was somewhere in there, or it grew, right? Like however you want to think about it. But yeah, JoDee, you're right. Like I have seen where like there are some teachers that they go into sales. I'm like, you all are killing it. Like
Yes, I know.
good for you. Good for you. I couldn't do it, but good for you.
Yeah. I
And
wanted to add though, like on the topic of like the multiple degrees, like I got a master's degree, but my school district paid for like 80% of it. And
Oh, wow.
so my word of advice to any young educator or a tenured educator who wants to get their master's, I would say somebody needs to pay for it. Like if you're going to be a teacher on a teacher salary and get your master's, your district should be paying for it, or somebody else should be paying for it, because they don't pay you enough to acquire all of those loans and what it costs, what education costs right now. And that's something that people don't really think about, as like, oh, it's an investment, it's going to help me make more. Well, look at that pay scale. Like what does that look like for you if you go get that certification or you go get that extra degree? So it's definitely a financial decision. And Allie can add to that.
No, I agree with you, JoDee. I think that's why I didn't go to do my master's in my first teaching job, was because I looked at the pay scale and it was going to cost me like, I don't know, $30,000, and I would only get paid $1,000 more a year. So I'm like, it's going to take me 30 years to pay this thing off. But other states, might have had a different additional salary if you have your master's degree. So it's definitely good to do your research and see what works for you. But also, like this, you use the word like investment. And so this is something we've kind of talked about, but I feel like a lot of times teachers, we go to PD, we do extra trainings, and sometimes our district pays for it, but I don't know. I've paid for out of pocket for different things myself. And it's a lot. It's a lot of money that we spend to keep ourselves qualified, to keep our certifications up. Like when I wasn't working, I had to take classes so that I could renew my credential, like when we were stationed overseas. And so that was out of pocket, right? I had to take education courses. I paid for AP training because they wouldn't hire me to teach AP unless I had the AP certification. So I put myself through that, and that wasn't really cheap, but it was very fun.
Well, and also you have to pay to renew your certificates.
You do.
Yeah.
So
True.
I think it's, before you go down the road of a big investment, which I think what JoDee was getting at, really consider like what are your short and long-term goals, and is that payoff going to be there? But Steve, I think if you can get your master's degree in a way that's cost effective or that works for your family, it's a huge asset. And to be honest with you, most employers, they're not even really looking necessarily, unless you're in a very specific field, for like what your degree is in, but having an advanced degree is an asset. So I'm sure that will help anybody who does have that degree land another job in the future. But think about it before you dive into something. Make sure you're really thinking it through.
I think one of the like pieces of advice we've been giving people lately is you're uncertain about like if you should be shifting out of the classroom, and you're like, well, I'm going to go take this course. Well, maybe think about, do you need to hire a resume expert? Do you need to hire what are they called? A recruiter? Like, what is that? Is you getting that extra certificate, if your plan is to exit anyways, is that actually what you need to invest your money in? Or do you need to invest your money in whatever is your next career?
Yeah. No, and that's a good point, because like if let's, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, this conversation was kind of not happening, right? Like teachers were just like, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm gonna die here. Like especially those are the worst. Like the history teachers, they don't
never
leave.
retire. They're there forever. No. I know a bunch of them. Yes.
I hope they're updating their history books.
Hopefully their districts are doing that. But yeah, they're there forever, right? So this is like 25 years ago. And so like no one was really having these conversations. Now that we do live in a moment of like the amount of resources that are out there, the amount of information, the kind of like what you're saying, like a recruiter, right? Like there's a lot of support, even though like there might be a little bit of investment to get that support. It might be worthwhile, right? Like to make sure that you leave in the right way, you get to the right doorstep or doorsteps, to make sure that you get it right. Because I think sometimes what I've seen is like they leave, and when they get to and I think I've mentioned this before to both of you, but like when they get to the wrong place, they're like, what have I done? Like they have like, there's like that daunting feeling of like, oh, I'm here, I guess I have to just live here for a bit until I find something different, because that's not fun either. And I'm sure that either of you can speak to that. But
and we've had people on our episodes that talk about how they made a shift and it wasn't right, and then they had to figure something out. But in the end, they said the bumps in the road were worth it when they eventually found where they wanted to be. And we've also talked with people who shifted out and then shifted back in because they finally found the work circumstance within a school that worked for them. So it took that little bit of a shift out and a shift back in to figure out what they really needed.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've said this openly, but the motivator for me to go back to the classroom. So my daughter Riley, she's 7 right now. The closer she gets to high school, the more I'm like, I'm going back.
We have the same thing. Like we just bought a new house. Okay. We are 2 blocks from the high school my kids would go to. Like, could you imagine if I could just walk to school? Like I could just walk to school and teach at the school that my kids would go to. And it's so tempting, but
Allie, you walk to your office.
That's true. I'm pretty short right now. But like with schools, it's hard to get into like certain schools. But no, I feel that so much, Steve, because I always thought that I would be at either the school or the school district where my kids went to school. And I have an older sister who's a school psychologist. And so she's in the school district where my nephew goes, and she's in the know. She knows all the things happening, the schedules, the classes to take, all the teachers. Like I want to know that stuff because I used to always know that stuff. But we'll see the closer we get, Steve, to our kids getting to high school, what actually happens. But I'm very happy with my job now.
I'm so opposite. Like I do not want to know. I never wanted to teach my daughter. She just learns better with anybody else but me. We have a really great relationship, but when it comes to like teaching, when I turn on my teacher hat, she's like, she's very sus.
That
As she would say. I mean,
my God, Riley says that too. Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, so she does have a conversation with me though. My daughter does. So she wants to be a teacher. Like she has it in her head. We're like, she wants to be a teacher. And so this week it was dress up like your teacher day kind of thing. So she had the cami lanyard. She had the leggings, right? Like she has it in her head what teachers wear, right? And she does ask me the question from time to time. She's like, Dad, when are you going back? Like she likes the idea of me teaching. And even though I do teach part-time, like she for some reason in her head, she loves the idea of like, no, Dad used to go and do that, right? And yeah, so part of me is like, yeah, probably just let me enjoy right now this little hiatus that I'm having.
Enjoy it. It's like a balancing act. I also have one of my two kids wants to be a teacher too, my youngest one. Mm-hmm. And so we talk about that a lot, and I'm encouraging because I actually think she'd be a great teacher. But she also says she wants to be like a gymnast and a this and a that. So there's a lot of things she wants to be when she grows up.
Right.
But she asked repeatedly, she switched schools this year, and she's like, can you please come and work at my school? Like, I want you to come and be at my school. I think the kids, they love the idea of their parents, not all of them maybe, but, being at school with, with their parent or being at work. That's really cool. But what I have to remind them of is, I got to go on your field trip last week because I'm not teaching, right? I got to be at your third grade play last Thursday morning at 8:30 because I'm not teaching. If I was teaching and those two activities happened to be like back to back, like there's no way I could have taken off part of Thursday and a Friday. There's just, it would have been very difficult for me to do that in most of the schools that I've worked at. And so I keep reminding myself when those things come up that I'm so fortunate right now that I can be there, that, being a parent is really important to me, and showing up for my kids is really important to me. And it's important to them. Like they, it's this balancing act. Like at the end of the day, the field trip that I went on recently, I had to log back in and I had to work for the rest of the day. It wasn't like a full day thing. And later on that evening, I was still working, and my son's like, I'm sorry that you have to work still because you went on the field trip. And I was like, I'm not sorry. It was totally worth it. I loved going on the field trip with you. It's just that I started a new job, 10 days ago. So I have to still work. But yeah, it's just, you just have to pick your battles and you'll figure it out.
And it's that time that you'll never get back, right? Like these companies that we all work for, that's the best gift of all, right? Like the salary, the flexibility, the lifestyle, that's all fine. But like having that time with our children is like truly special.
My daughter now notices if I'm not at a school event or something. So like last Friday, she was at a track meet, and we have one car. We live in the city, and my husband needed the car that day. And so she had this track meet on the other side of town where I couldn't take public transportation, and she won the 100-meter dash. And I was just filled with so much sadness that I wasn't there. And it rarely ever happens, but she kept me posted all day. Parents were taking video and stuff, and she has a track meet tomorrow. But like, it's very rare I don't get to be at those events, but it still hurts a little bit when I can't. But I'm glad for the most part that I have this lifestyle now that allows me the flexibility to be more present and not have to, piece possibilities together or make sub plans or anything like that. Like it's just
not a sub plan. Not a sub plan.
Also, I don't know how you guys, like, whenever you left your kids with a sub, there's a certain type of feeling you have if you don't know that sub specifically, like you just have certain kids that really rely on your presence being there, and the success of their day relies on you setting it up right for them. And so sometimes that really throws kids off when you're not there. And so that was always a tough thing to swallow too, is there's this sub coming in. I've never met them before. And I'm not sure how today is going to go, but my kids will let me know tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, and I think on that note, JoDee, like missing a day of school, it's a pretty big deal. Like you try to avoid missing school. But on my team now, someone was talking about how they still have PTO left that they haven't used. And, our supervisor was like, you should definitely use all of your PTO. Like everybody should use your paid time off. And I still have some time, that I need to take off for for this calendar year or whatever. And I don't think anybody at a school ever said to me, like, use all of your 10 days off. Make sure you take that time off. Go on a vacation with your family, never. And I know that it's a big disruption to the system, like JoDee explained, but I think that's one of the ways that we can try to help, make things a little bit better so that teachers can have more of a normal life, right? If they want to go to a cousin's wedding that's out of town, like they don't have to leave at 7 p.m. on a Friday to make it there or something like that.
Yeah. And we are coming up. This conversation was like, time is just flying, but it's the language of it too. Cause I don't know how it was for you, but like for my district, it wasn't even called PTO. Like, no, your PTO is in the summer. Like you have that off. No, it's like the days that are given, those are sick days. So it kind of sends the message of like, when you're not here, it's only because you're sick.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird.
I can remember like going online and seeing how much sick time I had and how much personal time I had. And like every time I needed to do something, I would log in to the system we had to see like I have 2.75 left. And I have, like I was just like, oh my gosh, like that type of worry to be able to take a day off if you are sick or, your child's sick or whatever it is, like it was really tough.
Absolutely. Well, so I've loved this conversation, by the way. I have a feeling we should probably do this again at some point in the future. And so Ali and JoDee, just know that like anytime you want me to talk about another type of shift, please, I'm super keen to be on your show again. I want to end the show with the one question that I always ask at the end, and which will be interesting. So because you're technically not in education, but you are making an impact on education in some way. But it's that question of like, what is under the hat for both of you right now, right? So like with what you're seeing, what is going well, perhaps what is keeping you up at night, like what is top of mind in education for you. Why don't we start with Ali?
So this is really perfect timing, and I was hoping it would come up on the show. This is actually the first ever youth apprenticeship week that the Department of Labor is starting or sponsoring. And so, top of mind for me is I really believe in these other alternatives like to college, and actually apprenticeship can even include college too. But I think more exposure to different career options at a younger age, starting in high school is too late. So even middle school and elementary school, like I've told JoDee, like my dream one day would be to like develop curriculum that teachers never have time to implement, but about different career pathways, different options. But I think apprenticeship is just such an amazing thing. And there's a lot of teacher apprenticeship programs that are growing all over the country, and they allow young people and, older people too, but it's Youth Apprenticeship Week, to be skilled in becoming an educator, and you get paid on the job training to earn and learn. So you get to learn how to be an educator, you get the time in the classroom, and it's just, anybody who did student teaching, you don't get paid for that, typically. And so you're giving up a whole semester, you're not getting paid. this is just a great pathway for people who want to be teachers. And it's not like what our parents or grandparents knew. It's not just, going into construction or, plumbing or something like that. You can go into IT, you can go into cybersecurity, you can go into teaching. And it's just something that the work that I did on a grant for 4 years for youth apprenticeship really stuck with me. And I'm just so excited to see this grow. And I hope that more people will learn about it, and that, they'll look into it as a possibility for their own kids, for youth that they know. And it's just something that I see growing a lot.
That's amazing. I love that. I love I taught in a CTE pathway myself. Yeah, that's super powerful. JoDee, what's top of mind with you?
Well, I was going to say, more arts integration, but I'm going to go with something a little bit different. I think restoring parent and school partnerships is really top of mind for me right now. I think coming off of the pandemic, having really, really big political division in our country has really made it difficult for educators and school systems to trust parents, and parents having a lot of distrust in teachers. And I would really like to see the parent and school partnerships come back to a healthy place where we can all work for the purpose of supporting young people, supporting them academically, emotionally. It's just not what it used to be. I would really just like to see more parents volunteering, more teachers open and welcoming parents into the classroom. And it's just something that we really need to work on, because we know that teachers and families are the biggest impactors in a child's life. And if they can work together, good things will happen.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, like both of you bring such a bright perspective to the show, and I really appreciate both of you being on. For those that want to check out the Teacher Shift podcast, I highly recommend it. I've listened to a few episodes before I was on and continue to listen now. Super powerful show. Podcasters just loving podcasters. Like that's what that's what I've learned as I've been a podcaster myself. And for those that are going to continue to visit my site, again, underhatpod.com. Again, this is the last one for a while. Expect the first one to drop for season 2. Expect that to drop sometime in August. I need to get my back to school life together with all the professional development that I will be looking after on the West Coast. But again, thanks, JoDee. Thanks, Allie. Thanks for being, for being on, for being a part of this. And thanks for anybody that's in the chat. I see you all on Instagram. Thanks for those that are watching in the future. And friends, as always, keep your hats on, but your minds open. And we'll see you all in August. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.